Hello, this is Mad Cat, the angry egalitarian that discusses this and that. Today is another edition of Mad Cat Smash 26. And remember, just because you can cry and get a lot of attention doesn't mean we can't figure out what it is that you're up to. We're smarter than you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started today. Just an update for everyone. I'm starting to do shows twice a week now on Mondays and Thursdays. That may change week from week depending on if I'm invited to any other shows or the honey badgers call me up from the bullpen. But let's go ahead and get started with our articles today as soon as my computer wants to operate. I think my computer's froze. Oh, there we go. It's just moving slow. Just one moment. There we go. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I don't know what accent this is. Hello, Polar Bear. No, it's not a random polar bear that walks by. It's just Polar Bear 21 in chat. Come on. I click you and then a box pops up. Come on. You're watching my computer in action not do what it's supposed to do. God, I'm just going to start smashing my computer. How about that? There we go. Yay, my computer doesn't have to die now. Okay, so I often don't report on Brietbart articles, mostly because they kind of go through our community pretty well. But I don't know, today there are two articles that really hit me that I felt like I wanted to talk about. So let's start with this one. Feminists are trying to frame Linus Torvalds for sexual assault, claims open source industry veteran. So, for those who don't know, Linus Torvalds was the person who created Linux off of the Unix kernel. Linux being an open source OS and has been a competitor for Windows and the Mac OS. Not a major competitor, but, you know, people like to use it. All right. So, feminists in tech have been staging attempted honey traps to frame prominent male software developers for sexual assault, according to explosive claims on the blog of Eric S. Raymond, a pioneer in the open source movement. In allegations that will rock the world of software development, prominent targets including Linus Torvalds, creator of the Linux kernel. See, told you. Hold on, let me get a soda. I just sort of woke up and I'm like, oh shit, I'm late. People are going to kill me. Alrighty. I'm sure you didn't need to hear any of that. Raymond quoted excerpts on an online chat with a trusted source who told him the ADA Innovation Initiative A recently discontinued feminist advocacy group in tech was trying to collect scalps by concocting charges of attempted sexual assault against male software developers. The source told Raymond that the MO, for those who don't know, which I'd be surprised if you don't, MO stands for modus operandi, which is basically their motive. Or I just like saying the word modus operandi. It's a fun word. Try saying it out loud. It's like, ooh, that feels good. The modus operandi of the feminists was to get alone with the target and immediately report attempted sexual assaults. The source said he had stopped mentoring female developers over fears they might fabricate such charges. And another explosive claim, the source alleges that Linus Torvalds, the renowned creator of the Linux kernel, perhaps the most famous example of open source software, is a top target for the Ada initiative. I don't blame them, honestly. He would be the top target. If you could get Linus Torvalds to be blackballed from the industry because of a sexual assault, that would give feminists like the unlimited funding that they would need. Like, oh, the most prominent person, in the world is committed sexual assault. Oh my God, there is a patriarchy, and his name is Linus Torvalds. Linus is never alone at any conference, claimed the source. This is not because he lets fame go to his head and likes having a posse around. They have made multiple runs at him. Now, Raymond really vouches for the source, although he has not revealed who this source is. If you go to his website, you can see the chat log, but it is heavily redacted. There's no E in Torvaldo for I'm sorry, I can't pronounce these names. We just have to make the best with what we got. Torvalds. Yeah, Torvalds. Excuse me. Besides, I like the name Torvalds. The short version is, if you're any kind of open source leader or senior figure, now you messed me up. By the way, this is conversation in chat, so sorry. Okay, go on. Do not be alone with any female ever at a technical conference, wrote Raymond on his blog. Try to avoid even being alone ever, because there's a chance that a woman in tech advocacy group is going to try to collect your scalp. Now, this is in reference to a blog that he posted, Raymond did. They have multiple runs at him. Just let the implications of that sink in for a bit. If my source is to be believed, and I have found him both well-informed and completely trustworthy in the past, this was not a series of misunderstandings. It was a deliberately planned and persistent campaign to frame Linus and feed him to an outrageous mob. Linus hasn't spoken about this. I can think of several plausible and good reasons for that. And the Ada initiative shut down earlier this year. Nevertheless, the report is consistent with the reports of social justice warriors, disinformatizaya, I don't know what that is, tactics from elsewhere, and I think that it would be the safest to assume that they are being replicated by other women in tech groups. Don't like that, ladies? Tough. You were just fine with collective guilt when the shoe was on the other foot. Enjoy your turn. I'm going to take my source implied advice and view sexual assault claims fitting with this MO with extreme skepticism in the future. If true, these claims will rock the world of software development, not to mention wider tech communities, which is suffering under the yoke of diversity campaigners leveling bogus charges of sexism at companies and individuals pestering companies to improve their diversity credentials. Despite widespread discussion in the industry of the explosive claims of Raymond's blog and the stature of Raymond within software development, other tech news outlets, normally championing at the bit to report diversity issues, have so far been curiously silent on this story. Now, what we're seeing is something brilliant. To know your enemy is to love your enemy. And that's why I can say this plan is brilliant. Because it is what we call a Xanatos gambit. What is a Xanatos gambit? Well, luckily I've pulled up the article of Xanatos gambit. It is a TV trope. A Xanatos gambit is a plan for which all foreseeable outcomes benefit the creator, including ones that superficially appear to be failure. The creator predicts potential attempts to thwart the plan and arranges the situation such that creator will ultimately benefit even if their adversary succeeds in stopping them. When faced with a Xanatos gambit, the options are either to accept the creator will get the upper hand and choose the outcome that is the least beneficial to them, or defeat them by finding a course they didn't predict. Now, I'll respond to what Polar Bear says. My issue with the article is how heavily it lies, I think he means relies, on a trusted source. And yeah, this could be a fabrication. This could be his source could be lying about this. But the sad part is I believe it. I could believe feminists trying to do this. We have seen past actions where feminists will try to paint themselves as the victims to get other people fired. I mean, what was it? The the Auto Gamergate block bot that some person got on because they happened to follow one person who was already on that block bot, and some girl at the IDGA started criticizing someone who got on there, which I think he also worked for IDGA. And just really went to town on him and eventually got him fired, even though he held the same views that she did. And they didn't bother researching. So yeah, I could believe that this story is real. Donglegate is another prime example. Thank you, Stig. Well, and Polar Bear, you're perfectly right. There is a chance that this is all made up, even though it's possible, and that we should proceed with caution. But let me explain how this is a Xanatos gambit, why the feminist plan is rather brilliant. So a woman basically gets a prominent male figure in the tech company alone, and then states that she was sexually harassed or sexually assaulted. Now, there's no witnesses there. And the way our legal system works is that we immediately believe a woman no matter what. The only way we don't believe a woman is if a man can prove that what she claims is not true. Now, two things will happen here. One, she will be believed, and this male figure is now blackballed from the industry. Or two, she's not believed. And someone figures out what the ruse is. But the feminists will then state, well, this is proof that we need more research into, the misogyny of the tech industry because they don't believe when a woman gets sexually assaulted. So, but what makes this a Xanatos gambit, okay, is what happens in response to this. As it was mentioned in that article, let's go back to the article. As it was mentioned, a person is now afraid to be a mentor to women. And it's women who are going to suffer because of this. Women who are already in the tech industry that are not a part of this are going to suffer because now prominent men are afraid to be alone with women. And this, feminists can get their claws into these women and tell them the reason why this man doesn't want to mentor you is because you're a woman, and they hate women, and will convince these women that they're being discriminated against and join their sides, prominent women in the tech industry, all because feminists are playing this shell game of saying that they were sexually assaulted and men being afraid to be alone with women. And this is what makes a Xanatos gambit. The feminists have concocted a plan that no matter what the result is, it will be in the feminist favor. And I'm sad to say there's not much we can do about it. The only thing we can really do about it is try to find non-feminists to join STEM fields. But since it seems in college these days that 2 out of 3 women are feminists, that's going to be difficult to do. Let's take a couple of chat comments in the chat. Polar Bear, I'm not a fan of listening and believing stuff, but I know all about Elevator Gate. Positive improvement. Polar, glad to see that the scratch point philosophy in your comments. Feminism, something happens, it's always bad for women no matter how they choose to look at it. Polar Bear, thanks, Positive. It's a screwed up anyway you slice it. Positive, women sexually assaulted, bad. Women sexually assaulted, bad for women. Women not sexually assaulted, bad for women. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Anyone remember Sierra reporting on the woman that's like, I need feminism because no one catcalls me? Well, how about you lose some weight and make yourself a little bit prettier? I'm just saying. If that's what your goal in life is to be catcalled, earn it. All right, so let's take a couple look at some of the comments since today will be a short day. Body cameras are a must. Let's make a claim. Make sure it goes public. Then bring on a video and destroy them. And honestly, that's what it's coming down to. This is something that, the honey badgers mentioned. That they had a tape recorder on them at all times, except for, the most important conversation, but the conference really pushed them not to have it, which they couldn't do, but they were really, really insistent. Shouldn't have to use body cameras. I hate that I have to stand by the claim of a collective guilt. Women who dislike it can stand up to feminism and gender politics and tech. Yeah, women, you need to stand up to this. Feminists, if you're watching and you're disgusted by this, you need to stand up and say, not only is this not feminism, but we're speaking out against this thing here. Because trust me, Many people around the world would start respecting you if you started cleaning house. If you started taking responsibility, and that's not a gendered comment, that's not a sexist comment, that's an important comment. The thing I like about the men's rights movement is they know how to clean house. Feminism, you suck at it. You need to get better. Michael Z. Williamson, don't make men wear body cameras. Teach women not to assault. So, a sexual hoax honey trap. Upvoted for intent, but it is much harder to do in practice. I tried for a while, but it soon became impractical. Someone will find out, then everyone will know, then nobody will talk to you because they think you're trying to catch them saying something wrong. No, demand surveillance cameras everywhere but bathrooms. Well, then they'll start inviting you in the bathroom. You said it. You must add it to audio recorders. A little pocket recorder the size of a USB stick. Oftentimes, audio is more important than video, which adds a layer of complexity, making it harder to get. And yeah, that is the problem with body cameras, is that in some places in the United States, and I imagine the first world, it is a crime to record someone without their consent. All right, so what's this about Jess Phillips? Oh yeah, Jess Phillips is that bitch in the UK that laughed at men's rights. Okay. Just comments from the chat. All right, let's read this fun article of redefining masculinity. Loading, 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 loading. Okay, so first it's talking about Mulan and how men should be men. And I haven't really seen Mulan, so I don't really get the reference, but it's just kind of like poking the bear, in all honesty. But for thousands of years, boys have heard a similar, darker, and less ironic set of gender-defining directives. Don't cry. Don't be a pussy. Bros before hoes. Man up. Get laid. Don't be a fag. Grow some balls. Be a man. This is far darker, a much more real version of masculinity most men grow up hearing as boys by our parents and classmates. This masculinity is toxic, turning boys and men inward, suppressing their emotions or channeling them through the escapes like sports, video games, and far more destructive activities like drinking, drug use, and violence towards themselves or others. Well, wait a minute. If video games, sports, drinking, drugs, violence are all indications of toxic masculinity, then how do you explain women who play sports, video games, drink, use drugs, and has violence towards themselves? Is that also toxic masculinity? Do women suffer from toxic masculinity directly? Or are women somehow excused from those activities as being perfectly okay, but when men do it, it's indication of toxic masculinity? So yeah, you already kind of see the theme on this one, that it's going to be a direct attack on boys nonstop. Positive improvement. They also hear protect women, never hit a woman, be a gentleman, etc. And yes, they very much do. Oh, come on. Sorry for that. If I hover over any of these things, it turns the screen black, so I apologize for that. This is the toxic hegemonic masculinity that is destructive to all people, to men and women, and to society as a whole. It is discussed in Jennifer Siebel's Newsom's brilliant documentary, The Mask You Live In. Yeah, you're not biased, are you? Boys naturally seek guidance from male role models, be they fathers, brothers, or friends who surround them. They also seek female role models as well. Both male and female children seek role models from both types of parental units. Even if they don't have that in their lives, they still try to seek it somewhere else. If they don't have a mother, they tend to seek it from a teacher. If they don't have a father, they tend to seek it from, a friend or a coach. But don't act like boys only seek a father approval. In college, they may get absorbed in a fraternity life in the US or lad culture in the UK. Although there are certainly good aspects of the Greek lifestyle or lad culture that can come from male bonding, oftentimes it leads to verbal or physical violence against women in the form of chanting, "No means yes, yes means anal" by one Yale fraternity, rape on U.S. campuses, and rampant sexism in the UK or worse. And what's that worse? Huh? Well, what is that worse? You've already stated rape, sexism, and chanting. What's worse than that? I find it quite questioning that you leave that thing kind of ambiguous, but detail everything else. And yes, on occasion, these fraternities do something bad. But I think, personally, from everything I've seen, that these fraternities are the exception, not the rule. But then again, I'm a part of groups all the time that makes rape jokes against men and women. I'm part of groups that we're just a bunch of shitlords sitting around. The red pill gamers are pretty much that. And we have women there. When I see the chant, "No means yes, yes means anal," it sounds like something we would say. A rape joke is not indicative of a rapist. And lately, many of the rape claims of U.S. campuses have been false rape allegations. And we have proof of that. Let's take some comments from the chat. They've also selective listening, cherry picking as a default. I look up to people. Oh, that was a Polar Bear who said that. Positive improvement. Also, I thought sports and video games were healthier ways to express things like aggressions. That's how it works for me. He continues on, he or she, but I assume he. I looked up to people of both genders in my family. Oftentimes, citation needed. Yeah, definitely. According to feminists, nothing is worse than rape, which is ridiculous. That's also true. You identify rape and sexism, and then worse. Nothing is worse than that. In fact, I saw an article where feminists are trying to get the legal sentencing of rape to be worse than murder. That you could kill someone and possibly face less jail time than if you rape a woman. I didn't report it on this video because there just wasn't enough to that article. It just sounded like bitches crying, but hopefully nothing comes of that. Polar Bear, yes means anal means we don't understand humor we're not a part of. Polar Bear 21, no means yes, yes means anal, but kill all men is a joke. That should be a chant. No means yes, yes means anal, but kill all men is a joke. And that's a very perfect example. Thank you for that, Polar Bear. Because Kill All Men is a joke, according to Time Magazine. Time Magazine had a fucking report on Kill All Men that it's just a joke. And yet the Yale publicly chanting that yes means anal. And you can't take a fucking joke. This is what men do with each other. Most of us are shitlords to each other. Positive improvement. If you think rape is worse than murder, it is a sign that your priorities are seriously fucked up. And you know, a feminist friend I once had, I talked about the Boko Haram thing, positive improvement. I talked about the Boko Haram, how before they kidnapped the women and the Save Our Girls or whatever that stupid campaign was. I mean, it wasn't stupid. I mean, yeah, definitely go save them. But I call it stupid because months prior, they locked up boys in a building and set fire to the building. And no one cared. And I told my feminist friend, and I'm like, honestly, I'd rather be raped than be burned alive. And she said, well, I think rape is far worse than being killed. And I'm like, yeah, but you know, as bad as rape is, you can recover from it. You can overcome rape. Maybe you can't ever let it go. Maybe it leaves emotional scars, but you're alive. Murder is forever. That you no longer exist. Let's go ahead and continue on. The American Psychological Association, Society for the Psychological Study of Men and Masculinity, determined that America's society socializes boys and men to conform to a definition of masculinity that emphasizes toughness, stoicism, acquisitiveness, I don't know what that is, and self-reliance, which they say leads to aggression, emotionally stunted males who not just harm themselves, but their children, partners, and entire communities. Well, see, here's the problem. There's a lot of truth in that. But this, and it's actually a man who wrote this article, but this person is really misunderstanding all of this. Masculinity is not a problem. Masculinity is perfectly fine. It's that how our culture itself, our parents, women, men, you know, derange people into having these awful personalities. It is culture that's a problem. Men who can't express themselves is not because they are masculine, and that's the problem. Because you know what? Women can also have problems expressing themselves. Is that also toxic masculinity? Do they have toxic masculinity in themselves? You know, I have difficulty expressing myself. Well, I can show emotions. I have difficulty crying. And it's not because I don't want to. Oh, believe me, my life would be easier if I could cry. And you know, I'll tell a true story here. And I'm not looking for sympathy on this, but you know, I think it's relevant to this article. I was abused as a child growing up. My stepfather was a sadist. And if there was one thing he loved more than anything in the world, was causing me pain. He loved to spank me. He loved to take his leather belt out and swing as hard as he could. He put his whole body into hitting my ass. And it's not like he did it a couple of times and, oh, well, you know, all boys go through that. He did it up to 20 times. He would do it every day. And that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that he told me, because I would start crying. I mean, who wouldn't cry from that? That you're being tortured. I would start crying. And then he would continue to hit me more, saying, if you keep crying, I'm going to keep hitting you. So I had to put a mental block on myself that if I received any sort of stress, if I received any sort of pain, I could not cry. I would not cry. And this left an emotional scar on me that I am not capable of crying. If I'm in pain, I can't cry. If someone close to me dies, I can't cry. I cannot bring myself to crying. Now, the only time I've ever been able to successfully cry in the last 10 years is if I'm in a BDSM scene. But that's a rather complex thing that I don't wish to talk about right now. But here's the kicker, that even though I've endured that, even though I suffered a lot of abuse, even though I felt like society has shit on me, especially in the last 3 years with my disability, I'm not a toxic person. I'm a masculine person, yes, but my masculinity is not toxic. And I've resisted the temptation to be an awful person. And I know firsthand that it's not that my masculinity is toxic, it's that culture itself is toxic. And I did try telling people in the past, and not a lot of people cared. So don't tell me that it's masculinity that's toxic. Don't tell me for 1 minute it is toxic, because I will tell you something. I've lived through it. You don't understand what people go through, what sort of abuse that they suffer. If you can turn around and say that it's their masculinity that's toxic, no, you don't get that right. Take a few comments in the chat here. Imagine if you went through all the negative traits women tend to have and started to call it toxic femininity. I mean, yeah, why don't we have toxic femininity? You want equality? Well, if there's toxic masculinity, there's toxic femininity. Positive improvement. Mad Cats, it's astounding that you didn't end up being a shitty person after growing up with that. Polar Bear 21. I saw a black man say, why is it the worst thing you can call a man is a woman? Positive improvement. Polar, I can't even begin to go through the things wrong with that. He goes on. Mad Cat, I've been there. Once you put up the solid emotional walls, it's almost impossible to break them down again. It's very true. Our society conditions men to be tough and stoic and self-reliant. And it does, and it can cause aggression. It can cause males to be emotionally stunted. This is true. But it's that we're socialized to be this. Meaning that the masculinity that we have in ourselves, there's nothing wrong with it. It's that we've had an outside force twist us around. However, boys are naturally aggressive. Boys naturally don't express their emotions the same way women do. And yet it's like feminists want everyone to be women, that there's only one gender. And if you don't act like us, you're the enemy. However, even though that boys naturally don't express their emotions the way women do, doesn't mean that it can't then be further twisted that boys can't have any emotions whatsoever. Positive improvement. Society forces men to be strong because nobody will give us shit if we don't take it for ourselves. And that's the thing there. We have to be strong in this society for 2 reasons. One, if we're not strong and we express that we're weak, no one's going to come to our aid. If a woman expresses weakness in public, you'll have men and women from everywhere rush to her aid. And it's like, oh, how can we help you? How can we protect you? Who did this to you? We will string them up by their ears. We will hang them, shoot them, stab them. We will do whatever it takes so you feel better. If a man shows weakness, he will be laughed at. He will be ridiculed. Oh, why can't you take care of yourself? Oh, why do you think anyone else is going to help you? And that's a consequence of a man expressing weakness in this society, is that no one will care. But the second problem is that women are not attracted to weakness. And I'll admit it, I'm not the personification of the masculine male in our society. I'm not very strong. I don't have a really big career. I'm not really all that good looking. Feminists talk about, toxic masculinity, but then you're really only referring to less than even 1% of 1% of 1% of guys who somehow figured out how to get women to sleep with them and will use manipulative tactics that women use to get sex. Because the most of us were not like that in any way whatsoever. And we're also ignored by the majority of women. Now, I'm not saying, woe is me, people should just sleep with me because blah, 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 blah. No, I accept that most women will never look at me and find me attractive. But I'm proof that if you're anything less than the idealized version that women have of men, women will ignore you. So that's why a lot of men will try to work hard for that image, will try to put on this front of being tough and aggressive and suppressing their emotions, because the majority of women want that. They don't want a brooding male. They just want a man who doesn't express his emotions. They want a man who will work and a woman doesn't have to. Now, I'm not saying all women are like this. I know a lot of women who are not like this. Unfortunately, they're married, but, and I say unfortunately because then that means I can't date them, but that's the general consensus of our society. So yes, men are taught to turn their emotions inward, but it is by their parental figures, it's by authority figures, but it's also by potential partners that it make this expectation on them. I'm going to take a couple of comments from chat and then I will get back to this article. Positive improvement. Society forced men to be strong. Oh, missed that comment. Positive improvement. In the same way, society encourages women to be weak in a lot of ways. Steig. To be fair, our genes make men more stoic and strong, not socialization. As I mentioned, men are naturally like this, but not as much as the socialization forces us. Positive improvement. Stig. Yeah, but it's not to the degree that society, he just confirmed what I said. And it would be possible to socialize in the other direction. I've met perfect examples of toxic masculinity by those guys that do terrible shit to both men and women. Just like the worst examples of women do bad shit to both genders. It's almost as if shitty people are the problem, not either gender. I say women should be attracted to weakness. Everybody can't be strong, Well, Time Like was the person who said this. And it's not that we should be attracted to weakness, but we should find other attributes to be strong, such as being really smart, being really resourceful, being there, being loyal, being a companion, being a good friend. These things should also be seen as being attractive. Because one way or another, there is one thing that we're all really good at doing, and that one thing should be seen as sexy. Even if it's being a loyal friend who will always be there. because most of these men that are jerks, they will leave the first moment that anything gets too complicated. And women will fall in love with these jerks time and time again. Positive improvement. Women really can't control what they're attracted to, though, and that is true. And we kind of have evolution to blame for that one. Damn you, evolution. It would be really hard to change that. Well, here's the kicker: is if feminists believe that gender is a socialized construct, then they have to believe that what people are attracted to is also a socialized concept. And yet, feminism doesn't really do anything to try to improve this situation of, well, women, you need to stop finding these gorillas over here attractive and start noticing these lesser primates. No, they don't do anything about that. But yeah, it is very difficult to change what people are attracted to. But I think that, just like men can be warped because of culture, I think what we find attractive is also warped by culture. If Beyonce married a, stereotypical nerd, you better believe a lot of feminists everywhere would start trying to find themselves the stereotypical nerd. Because their idol does it, people will tend to do the same thing. So you can't directly change it, but you can indirectly influence it. All right, so the process of socialization of toxic masculinity begins from birth. Clinic psychologist David Wexler states even at age 2, girls refer to feeling more frequently than boys, and after age 4 or 5, boys are not only held less than girls, but expressions of emotions of fear and sadness by boys are more likely to be discouraged and punished by parents, which is true. It is sadly true, but it's true, which is an indication that it's a problem of society and not masculinity itself. Attorney and staff writer for the National Review, David French. Why tell us it's this David French? Why don't you put that link under the name so we can look it up? In fact, I don't even know who the fuck David French is. Reflects upon his childhood growing up in the South and the larger cultural shift in definitions of masculinity. And in kindergarten, he once punched a boy for saying he hit like a girl. And instead of being punished, the teacher said the boy deserved to be punched. Well, yeah, I kind of agree with that. There's consequences to your actions. And that little boy learned if he calls someone a girl, he's going to get punched. Well, guess what he's not going to do again? Call someone a girl. Actually, he probably will, but, in the last 200 years, French argues there's been a cultural shift from an honor culture where transgressions towards one's honor and integrity are met with duels to the death to a victim culture where people respond to the even slightest unintentional offense, but must respond to that offense on their own, but respond to powerful others or administrative bodies. This is the culture of microaggressions, where hypersensitivity and fragility makes them politically and socially strong. French describes the liberal elite he encountered when he left the South to the Northwest as whiny, petulant, hypersensitive, and incapable of either physical self-defense or even the rudimentary tasks of manual labor. The two extreme forms of masculinity, one hyper-aggressive, one hypersensitive, should both be considered toxic forms of masculinity. Although hypersensitive form of masculinity is arguably less prone to violence, it's still an extreme response to the question of what it means to be a man. So let me get this straight. You're against hyperaggression because it's violent, but you're against hypersensitivity because, well, it's also bad. God, there's no winning with you. Too much of something, bad. Too little of something, bad. So that must mean that there's a happy balance of both. That aggression is okay so long as it's in check. Because that's not what you've stated so far. You said that the reason why we turn to aggression, to sports, to video games, is because of toxic masculinity. And now you're trying to suggest that there's a happy medium somewhere. No. That is not what you were saying. And now it's like you're trying to backpedal. It's like, no. This is what I actually mean. Well, you wrote this fucking article. Maybe you should have explicitly stated what you meant when you said it. Given this context, it should therefore come as no surprise to you that the hashtag masculinity so fragile, which trended in September, was met with aggressive responses from many men. The hashtag was created to highlight the effects of negative masculinity and that proving yourself as a man inherently involves being aggressively masculine, cursing, or physically violent against one attacking your masculinity. Oh, so fucking cursing is a toxic masculinity? Oh, okay. How's this for toxic masculinity, you stupid fucktard? Why'd you go fuck yourself up the ass? How's that for cussing? Oh no, I'm toxic now. Stay away from me. I have toxic masculinity. God, you're such a fucking idiot. Even, and perhaps especially, is the attacker if the attacker is female. One example by Mech of Justice WZ tweeted, in all seriousness, I am challenging, is this a woman, by the way? I thought Mech of Justice was a guy. Maybe I'm just biased on that. I challenge any female tweeting unironically masculinity so fragile to the last 3 rounds in a fight. Let's see who is fragile. What Mech of Justice WZ and others like him. So why did you say if the attacker is female and then refer to Mech of Justice and then state that Mech of Justice is a male? It seems like you're just trying to add salt to the wounds. Failed to realize is that their hyper-aggressive response perfectly proves the point a masculinity so fragile is making. It's not a personal attack on men, but how society has socialized men in the toxic masculinity that the patriarchy has created. You know, I'm not even going to talk about how the patriarchy doesn't exist and was a concept created by feminists just so they could get more money out of the government. But while you might feel that this is what the hashtag is, you're not there when we're, as men, being told that, oh, your masculinity is so fragile. When we try to talk about the issues that men face in this society, we try to talk to feminists, and it's like they say, oh, well, 1 in 5 women will be raped. And it's like, well, men are also equally raped. Oh, masculinity is so fragile. Oh, poor you. You can't take a little bit of suffering. That's what masculinity so fragile is about. It's an insult. So when we're insulted like this, because you're not there for that, you can sit back and say, oh, well, clearly this is about, you know, responding to like all of the bad stuff that's put onto men, you know, and we're trying to be there for you, that you really are fragile. No, this is an insult and we're responding to the insult. You don't get to tell us how we should and shouldn't respond to something when you don't know all the fucking facts. Oh no, I swore again. Am I toxic? Uh-oh. Positive improvement is reporting me for my toxic masculinity. Polar Bear 21. Oh God, I love you. If toxic masculinity equals cursing, wouldn't that prove a lot of feminists are toxic? Well, they are toxic, but for different reasons. Although the aggressive responses by men to this hashtag were left in the Twitter sphere, it's not always the case. 97% of school shooters are male. One need to look no further than Columbine, Aurora, Sandy Hook, the Navy Yard, Boston Marathon bomber, and UC Santa Barbara shooting, or the Charleston AME church shooting, to see an obviously terrifying pattern emerging. That all of these people were crazy? Oh, because they were all men. Well, one needs to look no further than all of the cases of the majority of cases of women sexually abusing their children, of the majority of false rape claims done by women, of women lying about the sexual abuse of their ex-husbands to try to win court cases. I think I'm starting to notice a pattern here. Women are vile creatures. Oh, it's so obvious. It's toxic femininity. You see how I can use your logic to make anything sound bad? Just because a lot of men are doing something doesn't mean that all men are bad. Because here's the kicker. Once again, it's the 1% of the 1% of the 1% into near infinitum 1%. Why don't we see it happening more often? Why don't we see a lot more men committing mass shootings? If toxic men, even if it was 1% of men, which would be about 3 million men every year walking into a public place and shooting up everything. Yes, all of these incidences involved men. Men are more likely to raise up arms. That is true, but it doesn't excuse women from their behaviors. And we're talking about such a vast minority of men, that the vast majority of men don't do this. But that doesn't enter into the equation at all. You take one little fact, it's like, oh, all of these are men. That must mean that men are toxic and vile. Positive improvements. If men are killing tons of people, maybe that should be a sign of the way men are treated in society is a problem. Yes, but they're not going to see it that way. They're going to see it as men are the problem, so we need to teach men not to do things. The UC Santa Barbara shooting is a particularly relevant in this context because of its direct intersection with the men's rights movement. What is he talking about? What the hell is the UC Santa Barbara shooting? Well, you might not recognize it by that name, but you might recognize who the shooter was. Elliot Rogers. Not an article goes by in a week that doesn't reference Elliot Rogers and try to say he was a men's rights activist. Feminists, listen up. And I'm going to repeat this every fucking time Elliot Rogers comes up in the conversation. He was not a men's rights activist. Going to a website doesn't make one a men's rights activist. You know what? I go to Jezebel every week. I go to Mary Sue every week. By that logic, that makes me a feminist. Well, I'm not a fucking feminist, and I think you can agree I'm not a fucking feminist. And that's the only reason why they think he's a men's rights activist. It's because he happened to visit a men's rights activist website on his computer. He also visited pickup artists' websites as well. And he clearly wasn't a pickup artist either. But let's see what you have to say about Elliot Rogers, even though you're so afraid to say his name, even though that would be great clickbait, but you're so afraid to say Elliot Rogers, but not afraid to implicate the men's rights movement into this shooting. No men's rights activist has ever done anything like this. None. The only way that you think it does is you have to twist it around so it makes it look like it is. And that is fucking slander. That actually, no, this is libel since it's written, but this is defamation of character. What began in the 1960s and 70s as a misogynistic backlash to the second wave feminism decrying female equality has been a resurgent in recent years. Gee, you don't sound biased in the slightest. Whose most radical members preach a hatred, disdain, and fear of women and of fraternizing of men while embracing the pickup artistry, bodybuilding, and other hyper-masculine activities. Citation needed. Which radical members are doing this? Please tell me which ones. Is it Elliot Rogers? Because we've already established Elliot Rogers wasn't a men's rights activist. So who's doing this? Who's the most radical of them all? Who thinks that hatred of women is cool? Naturally, there have been a number of disagreements between men's rights activist members and feminists, with the debate between them in 2012 being canceled by Conventor due to a barrage of hate speech and threats from both campuses. Actually, I missed that one. What's that referring to? Oh, I don't know at the moment. But the UC Santa Barbara shooter, for example, turned to MRA websites to justify his demeaning and disrespectful behavior towards women, eventually pegging his victim's fate to supposed injustice of them not being attracted to him. And let's look at the things that he quoted. It's not fair. You girls have never been attracted to me. I don't know why you girls never attracted to me, but I will punish you all for it. It's an injustice, a crime, because I don't know what you don't see in me. I'm the perfect guy, and yet you throw yourself at obnoxious men instead of me, the supreme gentleman. I will punish all of you, he says again, and then he laughs. I think this is referring to a video. But, here's the kicker. They are always quote mining Elliot Rogers. And, I'm not showing this on camera because it is rather hard to look at. And I could actually understand if people have get triggered by this. It almost triggers me. But I'm looking at his manifesto, and it is really bad. And, if there's any feminists out there listening to this, I want you to hear what's actually in his manifesto. I'm going to read a couple of excerpts. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Well, for one, it's 141 pages, and two, there's some really, really bad stuff in here. But he talks about his day of retribution, and he says the first phase of his vengeance is silently killing as many people as he can by luring them into the apartment. Now, the first thing he has to do is kill his two housemates. Now, when he killed 3 people, 2 housemates and a friend, which to mention they were all men. He killed them with a knife. Okay? But he had planned to already kill them so he could have the apartment to himself and then do horrible, horrible things. And he goes into explicit detail of the things that he wants to do. I'm not reading that over the air. It's bad. But then he talks about the first phase will represent my vengeance against all men who've had pleasurable sex lives while I've had to suffer. Things will be fair once I make them suffer as I did. I will finally even the score. And he's referring to some of the bad stuff that he plans on doing. What he mentioned before, what he plans on doing to these men and women. Second day, of course, is about women. He does talk about the sorority, that it's somehow the hottest on campus, and goes through quite some detail on that. It's the final phase of his day of retribution. Because, yeah, we know that he wants to kill women. That's obvious. it's not so known that he wants to kill men, but the final day of retribution, his ultimate showdown in the streets, he said that he would drive to his father's house and kill his little brother because he doesn't want his little brother to surpass him. Then he would kill his stepmother. He is thankful that his father is away on a business trip because he's afraid that he might hesitate in killing him. So he doesn't want to deal with that. And then he will grab an SUV and mow people down on the streets. So he was fucked up in a lot of different ways, and yet you feminists are always quote mining him. You take out one little thing he says, read his fucking manifesto. If you're going to start quote mining him, read this entire thing. And I know that you pulled these quotes from some other feminist websites like, oh, this is good, I'll use it for my article, without understanding the full context of what's being said. Hold on, I'm trying to get the chat back up. There we go. Positive improvement. Honestly, the Elliot Rodgers type stuff makes me think that maybe we should stop raising boys with the idea that being with a woman is the highest goal you can aim for. Because, you know, that's something that I believe Alison Tiemann once said. She said that, you know, if Elliot Rodgers had ever, you know, contacted the Honey Badgers, the first thing the Honey Badgers would have told him is stop basing your life on the pursuit of woman's approval. That if he had contacted any men's rights activist, they would have told him the same thing, that it's your pursuit of women that makes you unhappy, and that you don't need them to be a good person. You don't need them to be a complete person. Society has warped you into that. Feminists have warped you into that, but it's not a necessity for you to be a complete person. So, purple marks the most important thing said. The feminist response to the men's rights movement has been a swift and near uniformly negative. They accuse MRAs of condoning rape culture and disrespecting women, or in response to the realization that the days of white male patriarchy dominance and thankfully starting to come to an end. One MRA website, A Voice for Men, counters that the redefinition of masculinity must not only come from within the men's rights movement, but be added to the original definition of men as providers and protectors, further defining masculinity within the hyper-aggressive toxic paradigm. Now, this is weird. First, he's saying that an MRA committed a mass shooting, and now he's complimenting the MRA on wanting to redefine it. That doesn't seem right. How does he go from one paragraph of accusing them of committing mass shootings to the next paragraph saying, yeah, that's what we should definitely do? Well, let's read further. What both movements, along with all men and women, need to realize is that we need to work together to redefine masculinity from both the hyper-aggressive and hypersensitive extremes. It's not just a male issue or a female issue, but a human rights issue. Women give birth to all children and to both cisgendered and transgendered boys who become men. However, us with feminism and other social justice movement, change and leadership must come from within. It cannot be up to women to redefine masculinity. Except it's women who do define masculinity because they call it toxic masculinity. They're the ones who are changing the definitions of everything. And when men try to say, no, this is what the definition of it is, or even try to say, well, we need to modify the definition, it's then seen as really, really bad. If feminists engage in dialogue with men, about both feminism and toxic masculinity instead of baiting them on Twitter, perhaps we may actually make some progress in society. No, because if you say, let's talk about your toxic masculinity, you need to stop. Men are going to take this as an insult. You're not going to make any headway by immediately insulting us. That's not how you get things done. And it's like you're saying, well, maybe if we talk to them, maybe society can improve. Yeah, by insulting us first. What if I went up to a woman and said, um, hey, feminist, let's talk about you being a cunt. It's really destructive for society. Do you think she would like, you know what? You're right. Let's talk about me being a cunt. It's a really horrible thing. No, she's going to be insulted by that. You're sitting here insulting men and saying that they have toxic masculinity and think that if we only talk to you, you might understand that you need to change. No, it doesn't work that way. Those who get it already see what the Twitter hashtag is doing. Those who don't are responding as you would expect with hate speech, anger, and violence. No, we're responding exactly as we should respond to it because it's an insult that's thrown at us, especially when those are the men who need the most help. Passive aggressive Twitter hashtags aren't helping anything. Oh, they're not passive aggressive. See, there's a difference between being a passive aggressive and being a shitlord. And are most likely doing more harm than good. No, you writing this article is doing more harm than good because you don't even recognize our point of view. You don't even try to get in our minds. You don't even try asking us our point of view. You just assume from your high horse that shoved up your ass. Yeah, I cussed again. I'm toxic. That shoved up your ass that you are right and everything we have to say is wrong. How about you get that horse out of your ass and you come and talk to me and I will tell you how everything is. And I promise I won't curse at you. I will talk in a professional manner. But for now, I'm going to ridicule you because you're a fucktard. And in case you don't know, fucktard is a fucking retard. Society itself also needs to change. Media representation of men needs to change. And most parents need to raise their sons to understand their own and other people's emotions, to express their needs non-violently, to know it's okay to cry when you're hurting. You know, he keeps saying parents, but you know, one part of a parent dynamic is a woman. And he's acknowledging that women being violent to men raises violent men, but he doesn't specifically state it. He's always keeping it at men. To know that it's okay to cry when you're hurting. We have made progress in the last 20 to 30 years, though. We've gone from SNL skits making fun of non-heteronormative masculinity like Lyle, the effeminate homosexual, and the ambiguously gay duo, the latter featuring the voice acting of Stephen Colbert. Why is that important to note? I mean, yeah, it is Stephen Colbert on there, but why is that important to note Stephen Colbert? To the visibility of men like Neil deGrasse Tyson, a voice for nerds everywhere, for prominently gay actors in leading roles like Neil Patrick Harris, Matt Bomer, and Jim Parsons. We need female to male transgender celebrities in mainstream media. We need non-imaginatically male politicians, male advocates for women's rights. You see, you're wanting these representations, but you don't realize that even if you have these representations, doesn't mean that they will be good people. It's like, oh, well, if we have a woman politician, that means that our society will cater more to women. No, not necessarily. She could hate women. Just because she's a woman doesn't mean that she will somehow make things better for women. And that's the thing that you people don't seem to understand. Mad Cat offering the most offensive olive branch ever. Yeah, I guess I am. All right, so another person stating Sierra. Wonder if that's Sierra McCord. I think it might be. Well, let's see. Well, let's pretend it is, and let's see what she has to say. Horseshit, every bit of this. There is no such thing as toxic masculinity. These are toxic people, but a gender cannot be toxic. And when you call masculinity toxic, you're calling all men toxic because masculinity is much a part of being a man as femininity is a part of being a woman. How would you like it if I flipped your logic around and said the fact that women kill their children are far more than men do show that we are a society and not raising our little girls right. We are raising them to not care about their children, and this toxic femininity needs to be stopped before more babies are killed by their mothers. 2, Elliot Rogers was not an MRA. I do not know how many times it has to be said before you stupid progressives get it through your heads. He was not an MRA. This really does sound like Sarah McCord. Get it yet? Got it yet? Or do you need me to say it 10,000 more times to make sure? Can you say it 10,000 more times? That'd be sexy. The MRM is not and has never been a misogynistic movement. Just because they oppose feminism doesn't make them woman haters. There are plenty of feminists who aren't women. There are plenty of feminists who aren't women, and there are plenty of women who aren't feminists. The MRM is fighting the ideology of feminism, not women in general. And the feminist ideology is one that needs to be fought because it is doing nothing but turning women into victims and treating all men as criminals. Masculinity, so fragile, was not meant to be used to fight against this imaginary toxic masculinity. It was meant to be used by feminists to attack men, and that's exactly what they did with it. Most of the feminist tweets in the hashtags were feminists insulting men as a whole and sticking that hashtag at the end. Nothing more. But what if a whole hashtag were created meant to insult women? How pissed would you be? And we don't need more men fighting for women's rights. There are plenty of those already. We need more women fighting for men's rights. Men are killing themselves left and right. They're having their genitals mutilated at birth. They're unfairly losing custody of their children and being forced into legal slavery, child support, and alimony. They're being forced to sign up for the draft when women aren't. They're unable to receive help if they are victims of domestic violence or sexual violence because there's no programs out there for men. And feminists attack and bullied the one man who tried to make one. And now, with this toxic masculinity narrative, you're even trying to strip men of their identity and tell them that they need to be more like women so they won't be violent offenders. If you want to know why young men are snapping and shooting up schools, that maybe look to these things as the cause and stop blaming men's biology. I think Sierra should start writing scripts for me. What does everyone else think? Because, reading her words, I just, naturally read them so well. How many non-feminist Sierras can there be? Oh, that's true. That's very true. Someone should tell her that I'm reading her words. All right, so let's go to our last article of the day. So, sorry. So, feminists are picketing and lashing out at Cassie J's The Red Pill movie. Now, if I'm sure all of you are aware of this because I have talked about it before. It's currently at 160,161. Dear God, do I wish I could donate to that. I really do. I don't even have $1 to donate to that. But actually, I'd want to donate $25. I could get early access to that video. But I mean, if any of you can donate, please do, even $1 more. I mean, if we can get her to the 175, she can make a high quality film. Anyways, let me stop pandering to her. Oh, let me read a comment by Positive Improvement first. One thing I love about men's rights activists is that they can rifle off a list of ways men are disadvantaged and provide proof of their claims. Feminists usually struggle to come up with one or two. That's true. All right, so the documentary Kickstarter project was successfully funded last week following an article by yours truly. Campaign donations surged. The movie sailed through its original goal of $97,000, and now, as icing on the cake, it is likely to exceed the amount raised by Anita Sarkeesian Tropes versus Women in Video Games. Anita Sarkeesian raised $158,000. Cassie J has raised at least 10,000 more than that, and has done it with less people as well. A series that had the entire weight of the progressive media behind it. Not going to lie, I'm enjoying the spectacle enormously. Although Jay is an accomplished filmmaker with 2 award-winning documentaries under her belt, she was forced to turn to Kickstarter after her original backers abandoned her. Grants and institutional support were revoked after Jay signaled that her documentary would not be a hit piece, but instead a fair-minded assessment of men's rights movement. Jay told me, we weren't finding executive producers who wanted to make a balanced approach. We found people who wanted to make a feminist film. But now, with a little help from the internet and your friendly neighborhood homo, Jay's documentary has been fully funded. And as I say, everyone should line up to suck Milo's cock. I'm just saying. It's not gay unless you enjoy it. Remember that. If you don't enjoy sucking Milo's dick, you're not gay. Needless to say, the feminists who hop the red pill would never see the light of day are not pleased. Not hopping, hoping, or hoped. Chief among them is David Frutrell, a man who, ironically enough, can only be described as the very embodiment of the pejorative stereotypes usually slung. Uh-oh. Oh, good. Sorry for that. He's also known by his online handle, which is, I promise I'm not making this up, Man Boobs. Oh, he's Man Boobs? For years, his existence has been defined by a terminally furious blog, We Hunted the Mammoth, where he obsessively chronicles the activities of men's rights movements, trying to convince an ever-dwindling audience that MRAs are a greater threat to civilization than aliens in Independence Day. Today we celebrate our freedom. I know, that's a bad impression, and I think I misquoted it too. Frutrell is apologetic that Jay's film has been funded. Oh, apoplectic, not apologetic. I can't read anymore. I've been doing this for too long. And even more upset that she's not persuaded by his repeated entreaties to see that men's rights movement for what it really is. Although Jay extended an offer for Frutrell to explain his perspective on the movement for her documentary, Frutrell publicly threw his toys out of the pram in a long-winded screed about why he refused. A feminist refusing to debate and preferring to hurl insults from the comfort of his living room? Who'd have thought it? Frutrell has since extended his attack on Jay, falsely accusing the filmmaker of lying about her track record of awards. Jay won an award at Cannes Independent Film Festival. Frutrell thinks she's a liar because the same name sounds too similar to the more well-known Cannes Film Festival. Seriously? Feminists aren't just upset that a fair documentary about the hatred of men's rights movement is going to be released. What really terrifies them is that Jay's own story. She was a feminist who intended to make a fly-on-the-wall documentary about the activists like Dean Esme and Paul Elam, in much the same way that she has profiled the U.S. abstinence movement. Instead, she discovered her own beliefs were changing, and now the documentary is about her personal journey as well as the movement itself. Feminists are shocked, angry, and afraid that one of their own could see the men's rights activists as anything less than pure evil. So they're doing all they can to assure that Jay's story never reach a wider audience. Polar Bear 21. Cassie J has a YouTube channel and has a video calling David Futrell out. It was glorious. I'll have to check that out. I did see the one that's kind of in the response to all of this, where she's saying that the MRA have no creative control over her film. I think that might have been the same one, though. Positive improvement. To be fair, I totally understand why feminists wouldn't want a balanced movie about the MRM. The MRM is an ideology opposed to feminism. Polar Bear. MRM equals facts. Feminism equals my feels. Positive improvement. Polar. It is just her name. I'd watch her videos. Oh, is it just her name? I'd watch her videos. Okay. Sorry, I'm looking at a TV, but the print is so small that sometimes I can't read the words even with my glasses on. Never mind, found it, subscribed. Polar Bear. Futrell is a master cunt. Positive improvement. Apoplectic. Very angry. That's what it means. Apoplectic. Apoplectic. Ick, not lick. Okay, apoplectic. I'll get it one of these days. So let's look at some of the angry tweets from the feminists. Ugh. Shame to see someone hoodwinked by the surface arguments without looking more closely at what the MRAs actually do. How do you know? You haven't seen the documentary. How can you make a judgment on the documentary without actually seeing the documentary? Oh, it's because you're a feminist. I forgot. You have this magical power that you don't need to do that. But then again, it's Amanda Marcotti, so, can't really rely on her to be logical, reasonable, sane. This whole thing is a shame. Shame or sham? Tracy Clark Flory. Did men's rights activists convert this feminist filmmaker? No, feminists converted this feminist to be a men's rights activist. I don't think she's a men's rights activist. She's probably an egalitarian, but it's your response to this. If she just made a balanced film and the feminists were all in full support of it, she would have said, you know what? The feminists really supported this film. They really wanted this film to be made. There's something more to the feminists than the men's rights activists believe. But instead of doing that, you did exactly what the men's rights movement said you would do. You made us right. You made the men's rights movement right by doing exactly what we know you would do. You would attack her and tell her that she's an awful person. You would tell her that she's being hoodwinked, that she doesn't know what's going on. And you've made her more popular. Because as Cassie J has said, it's not the men's rights activists that really supported her. And then I did, and I know a few other people did, but it was the anti-censorship people that mostly funded her. Because you feminists were trying to censor her. Your act of censorship got her funding. Be proud of that. Sorry, I'm just reading some comments. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. How a feminist making a doc on Emrace ended up questioning her beliefs and having her film funded by her very subjects. Her beliefs should be questioned. I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing about the men's rights movement, is that we question each other all the time. I know a lot of people that I disagree with on a normal basis. I mean, observing libertarian, I disagree with him on many issues. We still have really great conversations. Factual feminist, I disagree with her on a regular basis. I still highly respect her. I disagree with a lot of different people. There's members of the Honey Badger Brigade that I disagree with, but that's a good thing. We should disagree with each other on things, because if we agreed with everything, then that would make us feminists who never question anything, who think that only one answer is the right answer for anything, and that's why they don't believe in compromise. David Futrell, you may not yet realize how terrible and how dishonest they are, but you will no doubt learn this in time from them. And this was October 30th. Positive improvement. It's hard to believe someone is a horrible person and part of a hate movement when you just finished talking to them and they seem very nice and honest. David Futrell's tweet is a great example of Sargon's Law. I'm not familiar with Sargon's Law. Can you go ahead and type it up for me real quick about what that is? I know I've heard of it. I just don't remember what it is. Modern feminism's social justice warrior goes to absurd lengths to prevent their critic arguments from being heard. They will claim that the university speakers are dangerous to students and attempt to bar them from campuses. They will pull fire alarms and call in bomb threats to events where the opponents are speaking. Anyone remember Gamergate in DC? The bomb threat scare by It Inch Tonight? I just love saying that. They will abuse the reporting features of a website like YouTube and Twitter to censor their opponents on the internet. Laughing Witch is a good example of this one. Underlying this reckless panic is fear. Fear that their own arguments will not stand up to scrutiny, and fear that their arguments of their opponents will win over impartial onlookers. Cassie J is the personification of fear. She's a fair-minded, award-winning, independent feminist filmmaker who actually talked to feminists' greatest critics and confirmed the worst fears of social justice warriors. Had her views changed as a result? Jay's declined to comment for this story, but she has in the past noted that the allegations that her film is MRA funded are nonsense. She says her Kickstarter backers come from all sides of the political, social, and sexual spectrums. Plus, Kickstarter prevents anyone from donating from having creative control over the project. I know this because I myself have done Kickstarter. It failed, but I've done it. Despite their best efforts, feminists will not be able to prevent her story from reaching an audience. Jay has raised enough to host her own Oscar-qualifying screenings of The Red Pill in LA and New York, and all the loonies have left is the impotent rage and an increasingly disillusioned public who, it seems, are keen to hear the other side of the story. The only thing feminists could do at this point is support it, because no one wants to be the people that it's going to have the tagline, "This is the film that feminists don't want you to see," that did everything to prevent it from being made. Sargon's Law. Whenever an ideologue makes a character judgment about someone they are debating with, that character judgment is usually true about themselves. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so at this point, that kind of ends my video. Let's take a quick look through some of these comments here. I think this could honestly reach the audience it needs to. An honest look, warts and all, at both sides of the gender debate and a frank examination of the filmmakers' changing opinions. Any feminist genuine in their conviction that the dictionary definition is correct will engage, and maybe we can see the winds of change blow. Very poetic and very true. Feminists are worse than communist elephant when it comes to memory and payback. She's no longer welcome at high tea in the village of the happy, nice people. So I'm happy that Jay's gotten her support. This is a film that needs to get made. We need to show what the men's right movement actually is. And I'm happy that she got the other side. I'm happy that she talked to feminists. I really am. I'm happy that she talked to Big Red. Because there's no way that her film could have ever been legitimate unless she got both sides of the opinion. I know this isn't going to be a hit piece. She's convinced me of that. Reading her articles, reading the Reddit AMA, she's convinced me of that. She's gotten both sides. She's tried to make it fair. She's tried to make it right down the middle and giving both sides a platform. But this is more than just that. It's also about her journey through this, interwoven in it. And I want to see that. Oh my God, I want to see that. I'm afraid it's going to be like 5 years before I finally see this film. But you know what? It'll be worth the wait. So I'm happy for this. And even if feminists try to pull out at the last minute, and I know some of them will, it won't matter. She will get her funding. And maybe it won't be the high quality video she wants to do, which I really hope she does. It will still be Oscar worthy. I know it will. I don't think she'll win an Oscar, not because it's not good, but because it's, you know, the Oscars. But I do think that it is a really great thing for our society that this film is being made. And if the feminists were really, really smart, they should really analyze this situation and say to themselves, you know what? Our best bet right now is to throw these other feminists under the bus and try to show as much support for this film as we can. Because if we try to show all the support we can for this, we might mitigate some of the damage that this film could do. If we try to show that feminist is not as bad as we've just displayed in trying to get this film, trying not to get this film abolished, you know, if we try to mitigate that, then people will see us as being good in the long run. Because if you don't do this, feminist, people are going to see you as being bad. And since I know no feminist is really going to watch this, I'm not afraid of you taking my idea. Much more than that, even if one of you feminists take this idea and say, this is what we need to do, it's going to be hard pressed for a group of feminists to do this, a significant number. I'm talking a couple of thousands of feminists doing this. But then again, I want you to do this. I want you to support this. I want you to be at the opposite end of the table talking. And this is what me and Yuki were trying to do. I still haven't heard from Yuki, by the way, and I hope I do one of these days just to know that he's all right. But we wanted to start the discussion, to open up talks and say, okay, let's identify the problems. These are what the problems are. Okay, how do we deal with those problems? And maybe it wouldn't solve anything, but at least it would have opened the door. Well, I think that this film is going to open up a lot of doors. And I think that this is probably one of the most important films of the early 21st century. Now, it'd be arrogant for me to say the most important film of the 21st century, but it might just be that. Let me take a quick look at some of the things in chat. Positive improvement. Feminists will never support the film. It would be akin to abandoning feminism, which they will never do. Feminists would be smart to just ignore it. Try to starve off its attention. Don't support it or oppose it. Just pretend it doesn't exist. But feminists will never learn from the Streisand effect. Goes both ways. Positive improvement also hopes that Sorota Yuki is okay. And you know what? You know, look at what happened with the suffragettes films. Feminists were had picketing signs. They laid in front so people would have to step over them. You know they're going to do the same thing for this. And it's only going to give more credence to the film that people should watch it because people like something with controversy. You know, it could be a bad film, but because there's controversy, people want to see it. Feminists are starting to talk. Look at the fireside chats and Sargon live streams. And that's very true, Polar Bear. Look at Sorota Yuki. He's a feminist who wanted to talk. And I do hope it's a trend too. Positive improvement. Anyways, I'm going to call it here. That does it for me. Looks like this was 2.5 hours again. Or was it one? No, it was 1.5 hours. So, yay, a shorter video. I will try to start doing shorter videos, I promise. Anyways, that does it for me. This is Mad Cat signing off.